The cold November rain had turned the courthouse steps into a treacherous descent. But Sarah Mitchell barely noticed. Her heels clicked against the wet stone as she clutched the finalized divorce. Papers to her chest, the ink still fresh, the words still burning. 5 years of marriage erased in 45 minutes of legal proceedings. She'd told herself she was prepared for this moment, that she'd cried all her tears months ago. But standing there in the rain, watching James walk away with his lawyer, she realized some pain never quite prepares you for its own arrival. "Mommy, you're getting all wet." 6-year-old Emma tugged at her coat, brown eyes wide with concern that no child should have to feel for their parent. Sarah forced a smile the kind mothers perfect through heartbreak, and took her daughter's hand. She was about to suggest getting ice, cream, their traditional remedy for bad days, when Emma suddenly froze, her small fingers tightening around Sarah's. "Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out across the courthouse plaza. James turned, his shoulders stiffening beneath his expensive suit. Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't expected to speak to him again today, maybe not for weeks. But Emma was already pulling away, running toward her father with the unguarded love only children possess, the kind that doesn't understand what irreconcilable differences means. Then Sarah saw her. The woman standing beside James's car, elegant in ways Sarah had never managed, checking her phone with practiced disinterest. The same woman whose perfume Sarah had smelled on James's shirt 6 months ago. The same woman who'd made her doubt everything about herself, her worth, her beauty, her place in the world. "Emma, wait!" Sarah started forward, but her daughter was already at James's side. James knelt down, catching Emma in his arms. And for a moment, Sarah saw the man she'd fallen in love with 9 years ago. The one who'd brought her coffee in bed every Sunday. The one who'd painted the nursery pale yellow, because she'd read it was the most calming color for babies. Then his expression shifted, guarded and distant, as if remembering that tenderness was no longer part of their agreement. "Hey, sweetheart," he murmured into Emma's hair. "What are you doing here?" Mommy had to sign papers. Important papers. Emma pulled back, studying her father's face with that unnerving perception children have. "Are you sad too, Daddy?" James's jaw tightened. It's complicated, Emma. "Mr. Richardson, we should go." The woman's voice was crisp, professional. She'd finally looked up from her phone, her gaze sliding over. Emma with thinly veiled impatience before landing on James. "You have at 2 o'clock. Sarah watched something flicker across James's face. Was it regret? Exhaustion? She couldn't tell anymore. There was a time when she could read every thought behind those green eyes, when his expressions were a language only she could speak. Now he was a stranger in a familiar face. Emma, oblivious to the tension, beamed up at the woman. "Are you Daddy's friend?" The woman's perfectly painted lips curved into something approximating a smile. "Yes, honey, She helps Daddy with work," James interrupted quickly, standing. He kept his hand on Emma's shoulder, a barrier between his old life and whatever new one he was constructing. "Emma, you should go back to your mom now." But Emma had that look, the one that meant she was processing something adults hoped she'd miss. She glanced between the woman and her father, then back at Sarah, who stood frozen 10 feet away, rain streaming down her face like tears she refused to shed. "It's okay, Daddy," Emma said suddenly, her voice carrying that heartbreaking wisdom of children forced to grow up too fast. "Mommy said sometimes people's hearts change directions. Like when we moved and had to use new GPS." James closed his eyes briefly. "Emma, but Mommy also said," Emma looked directly at the woman now, her 6-year-old face serious and unafraid, "that she still loves you. She said it to Grandma on the phone last night. She said, 'I still love him, Mom. I just can't be with someone who doesn't love me back.'" She was crying, but she didn't know I could hear. The world stopped. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The courthouse plaza seemed to tilt, the rain suddenly too loud, her heartbeat suddenly too visible. She wanted to disappear, to rewind 30 seconds, to have kept Emma home today like her mother had suggested. "Emma!" Her voice came out strangled. But the damage was done. James had turned slowly, so slowly, away from his car, away from the woman whose expression had shifted from impatience to something harder to read. He was looking at Sarah now, really looking. And she saw the exact moment her daughter's words landed. Saw his carefully constructed armor crack just slightly. "Sarah," he started. "Don't." She held up her hand, pride warring with the mortification flooding through her. "Emma, come here, now." But Emma wasn't moving. She was looking up at her father with that same serious expression. "Mommy's really sad, Daddy. She tries to hide it, but I know. She cries when she thinks I'm asleep. She looks at our old pictures when she thinks I'm not watching. Emma, that's enough." Sarah's voice broke despite her best efforts. She'd been so careful, so determined to protect Emma from the ugliness of adult pain. And now her daughter was, exposing her raw heart in front of the man who'd shattered it and the woman who'd helped him do it. James looked stricken. The woman beside the car had gone very still, her phone forgotten in her hand. "I didn't know," James began. "Of course you didn't know," Sarah said, finding her voice even as tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "Because I have dignity. James. Because I wasn't going to make this harder on Emma by falling apart. Because some of us actually put our child first." The words came out sharper than she intended. Years of suppressed hurt finally finding their edge. She moved toward Emma, needing to end this scene, to get her daughter away from this moment that would probably require years of therapy to unpack. But as she reached for Emma's hand, James spoke. "I was scared." Sarah stopped. "What?" He was looking at her now with an expression she hadn't seen in years. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. "I was scared, Sarah, terrified, of how much you needed me, of how much I needed you, of failing you the way my father failed my mother. So He glanced at the woman by the car, then back at Sarah. "I sabotaged it. I pushed you away before you could leave me first." The woman shifted uncomfortably. "James, I don't think—" "No, Melissa. Let me finish. He never broke eye contact with Sarah. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me, that Emma would be better off. I told myself all the ways I was failing you both, and then I made sure I actually failed so I could prove myself right." Sarah's chest was tight. "That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard." "I know. You destroyed our family because you were afraid. I know. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I'd done something wrong. I know." His voice cracked. "I know, Sarah. And I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." He looked down at Emma, who was watching them both with wide eyes. "I'm sorry for hurting your mom, sweetheart. For hurting you. For being exactly the man I swore I'd never become." Melissa cleared her throat. "James, your meeting—" "Cancel it." He didn't look away from Sarah and Emma. "Cancel everything."
"James."
"I mean it, Melissa. Thank you for everything. But I need to be here. I need to try to fix what I broke." Melissa stared at him for a long moment. Then at Sarah, really looked at her. Perhaps seeing for the first time, not a rival but a woman, who'd loved the same complicated man she'd been trying to figure out for months. Something passed across her face, recognition maybe, or resignation, or relief. She nodded once, got in the car, and drove away. The rain continued to fall. Emma tugged on James's hand, then Sarah's, pulling them both down to her level. "Does this mean we can be a family again?" Sarah's heart fractured. "Baby, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You love Daddy. Daddy's sorry. That's what you always tell me. Say sorry and mean it and try to fix it." James reached out tentatively, his hand hovering near Sarah's arm before dropping. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've broken your trust in ways that might be impossible to repair. But Emma's right, I am sorry. And I want to try. Not to go back to what we were, but to build something new. Something honest." Sarah looked at this man, her husband. Her ex-husband, the father of her child, the breaker of her heart. She thought about all the nights she'd cried into her pillow, all the mornings she'd pasted on a smile for Emma's sake, all the ways she'd convinced herself she was better off alone than with someone who couldn't love her the way she deserved. But she also thought about the man who'd held her hand through 12 hours of labor, who'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, who'd once loved her enough to promise forever, even if he'd been too broken to deliver. "I can't promise anything," she finally said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I can't promise I can trust you again. I can't promise this ends with us back together. I know. But—" She looked at Emma, whose hopeful face was almost too much to bear. We could try therapy. Real therapy, not just for show. And you have to be honest. About everything. About why you really left. About what you're really afraid of. No more running? James nodded, tears streaming down his face now. No more running. Emma threw her arms around both of them, pulling them into a wet, awkward embrace on the courthouse steps. Sarah let herself lean into it just for a moment, feeling the weight of the past year begin to shift. Not disappear. The pain was still there, the betrayal still real. But maybe, just maybe, there was room for something else, too. Hope, possibility, the kind of love that survives death and grows back stronger. Can we get ice cream now? Emma asked, her voice muffled against their coats. Sarah laughed, surprising herself. Yeah, baby, we can get ice cream. As they stood to leave, James caught Sarah's hand. Thank you, he whispered, for being brave enough to still love me when I didn't deserve it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it. Sarah didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away either. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others, but maybe, with enough honesty and time and grace, even shattered things can become whole again. Not the same as before, but something new, something earned. Together, hand in hand, they walked toward an uncertain future that suddenly felt a little less lonely.